Hello everyone, this is Andy Nowicki, your right-wing English teacher. Today I want to talk about Nathaniel Hawthorne's famous short story, Young Goodman Brown. Now, Nathaniel Hawthorne was somewhat fascinated with his own ancestry and his own ancestry in early America, being the Puritans in New England. Just about all of his stories, short stories, and the couple of novels that he wrote, most of what he wrote was in the most famous stuff that he wrote was either in the short story format or the novel format. His most famous work, either short story or novel, was of course The Scarlet Letter. But regardless, almost all of them take place in New England during the Puritan era. He was just completely riveted by, fascinated by, obsessed with this particular era of history. And of course, it was his own, this is his own past. These were his own ancestors, his own forefathers, who existed there and who did great things and also terrible things. And Hawthorne himself was of two minds about his own ancestry. On the one hand, he really admired the Puritans for their conviction, for their fortitude, for their willingness to strike out, to leave their comfortable homeland for their faith and go to this wilderness where there's disease and death and marauding Indians and all the kinds of things that that one had to deal with in the North American wilderness in the 1600s. He really admired them for a lot, but at the same time, he was aware of the dark side of the Puritan nature and the what do you want to call it, the intolerance, the witch hunt mentality. He was well aware of that aspect of the Puritan mindset as well. Now, Young Goodman Brown is a very interesting story. It may be the most famous of all of his short stories. And I will just summarize it for the assembled throngs who are listening to this podcast with bated breath, if you haven't already read it. The story concerns a man named Brown, and the title is Young Goodman Brown. Now, in the Puritan milieu, Goodman is kind of like saying Mr. It's just a title. It's a title for the commoner. So it's like saying young Mr. Brown. So Goodman is is like saying Mr. and he's married to a woman named Faith, and she is Goody Brown. That was the title for a woman, a married woman. It's like saying Mrs. Goody, meaning good wife. So at the beginning of the story, young Goodman Brown is setting out on a mysterious errand into the forest. His wife, Faith, whom he's just married, he's newly married to, loves her dearly, loves her tenderly, thinks of her as the essence of all that is good, the essence of all that is innocent. She is very pretty. She has her pink ribbons in her hair. Her pink ribbons are part of what is discussed, correlating to Faith, whose name is also significant, as we will see. So at the beginning of the story, Faith, it's the early morning hours, Faith begs her husband not to go on this errand. He tells her, look, this is something I have to do, but I will be back, and I promise you that, and so I gotta leave now. But I love you and wish you the best. While I'm gone. And so she is resigned to the fact that he's determined to do this. We still don't know exactly what, but she says, "All right, I'm a good wife, and I submit to my husband's wishes, and this is something that he knows he has to do. So therefore, I support you, and farewell." She doesn't bitch at him anymore. This is not a modern woman here. She doesn't nag him. She doesn't say, "How dare you do this to me?" or anything like that. She lets him know at first a little bit that she's a little scared. She's fearful. But when he says he has to go, she says, "All right then, God be with you." So young Goodman Brown, goes off into the woods, into the dark forest, and he meets with a man in the dark forest who looks like he could be his father, but we soon find out that this man that he meets in the forest, who looks like he could be his father, is in fact a supernatural being, or more properly, a preternatural being, i.e., he's the devil. And he talks about how, as they're walking together, he talks about how he knows so many people in the neighboring villages, in these good, supposedly good Christian communities. He's on such intimate terms with so many people in so many ways. And Brown is taken aback by all this, but he thinks this can't possibly be. I don't believe this. But he keeps walking with him, and then they meet up with, or Brown hides away behind a tree while the devil man meets up with a woman who he knows is a good woman in the town, Goody Cloyce. I can't believe I still remember that name. The woman who taught him his catechism, who gave him his religious upbringing. And they discuss, the devil and Goody Cloyce discuss various potions and ideas for deviltry and spells and so forth. And at this point, he is just absolutely, that is to say, young Goodman Brown is absolutely right. I mean, he sees the evidence right before his eyes, but he thinks, no, this can't be so. This can't be so. And he says to himself, I feel so bad for having left Faith behind, but she means so much to me. She's such a good woman. She's so innocent and pure. And he says, I'll cling to her skirts and follow her to heaven. This is how much he looks up to her. This is how highly he esteems her. But as they're walking, eventually, he hears a bunch of voices, and then he hears among them Faith's voice, and then he sees her pink ribbons flutter away into the air. And at this point, young Goodman Brown knows that he's been told that there's this meeting where the devil's going to be initiating new recruits into his into Satanism. And he hears all these voices of people that he knows, and then he's still able to cling on to his sanity until Faith's voice is heard among them, and her pink ribbons are seen floating away. These symbols of her innocence float away in the wind. At that point, he loses it. He grabs the devil's staff. The devil offers him his staff, his walking stick. He takes it. Freud would have a field day with that, wouldn't he? But I'm not going to go there. So he takes the devil's staff, and it leads him through the forest in the supernatural or preternatural way. That's an important distinction there. Look them up, supernatural versus preternatural. Something I didn't know about until a couple of years ago when I was studying exorcisms and and the demonic in general. So it leads him through the forest, and he's losing his mind, cackling, uttering all kinds of blasphemies. And this is a man, a good godly man, a man of faith. And it takes him to this spot in the forest where there's this ceremony taking place, and he sees the devil speaking to these new initiates, telling them that evil can be their only comfort in life. And I can't remember the exact line, but it's something like evil is all that you know. And he talks about various things that people are doing in secret. All of their evil deeds. Their evil deeds are what truly define them. All these supposedly good, godly people are really engaging in evil, satanic activities, and so they're most properly they can most properly be found, or they can find their true home, their true spiritual home, in Satanism. And he sees young Goodman Brown sees Faith among this throng, and he shouts out to her, "No, don't do it, Faith," and he collapses. And then he wakes up in the woods, and nobody's there. And there's no sign that anybody's ever been there. And we get the impression that maybe this was all just a fantastic dream that he had. Maybe he wandered into the woods on this mysterious errand that he never revealed, that we never really knew what it was, but apparently it involved meeting up with the devil in the woods, but maybe it was all just a dream. But it doesn't end there. The real kicker in the story is what follows, the final couple of paragraphs of the story, where we learn that when young Goodman Brown goes back to his home and meets his wife again, he gives her a stern, sad look and walks on. She rushes out to greet him, to give him a hug, and he just glares at her with a stern, sad look and walks away. And then we're told that for the rest of his life, that young Goodman Brown lived a long life, many, many years after that, and he had many children with Faith, but that he changed. He became somebody who did not trust anyone anymore, and he would go to the church on Sunday, hear the preacher's words, and just think to himself, why isn't the church just struck down? Why doesn't God just take this whole place out with a lightning bolt, seeing as how much evil these people are really up to? In other words, he's convinced that this vision that he saw is the truth, that it's real, that whether it was actually real in substance, it's real in its essence, in what it says about the people around him. And so, and then we find the final line of the story is that after young Goodman Brown dies, leaving behind a large family, they carve no hopeful words on his tombstone, for his dying hour was gloom. So this story is I find a very powerful story. And I think if you read, even though I pretty much gave away the ending here, I don't think I gave it away. I don't think this isn't a story where, when you're told the ending, you can't appreciate it when you read it. It's not that kind of story. It's not a thriller. It's not a mystery. It's not like giving away, who the killer is or anything like that. I encourage you to read it. It's a short story. It's a fun read. It's a very elegant read. That's something that we've lost in literature, just as in culture. It's a story about dark, depraved things, activities, actions, and so forth. It's a story about Satanism, but it's also very elegantly written, non-vulgar kind of story. I just read a review of one of my books where I was called vulgar, and I have to agree, a lot of my work is quite vulgar. And I can justify that to some degree. I can justify it or not justify it. But I think it can, to some degree or other, be justified. And I'm not against vulgarity on principle, but I do find it, I find something very appealing about Hawthorne's ability, the ability of writers in a bygone era to write it, to touch on these sorts of themes in a powerful way, but to do it in a way that doesn't involve just dragging you down in the muck and thrusting your face in the muck and making you experience this kind of vulgarity, while at the same time they're hinting at some of the deepest, darkest, most awful kinds of things imaginable. I mean, Satan, hell, is filled with vulgar, blasphemous activities, mindsets, and so forth. But in any case, that's just part of how what I find appealing about the writing of it, and I think it has something. There is something to be said for that kind of restraint in our day, when everything's you just let everything hang out pretty much, and that's the way it is. But more properly, this is looking more at the theme of the story. The story involves a man who is disillusioned. How easy it is to become disillusioned. How easy it is to see evil everywhere, because evil is everywhere. It permeates into so many things, and people that we knew, that we thought we knew, are really up to the kind of things that we would never think that they would be into or up to. And it's very easy to grow disillusioned, and that's the real tragedy of the story, is that the tragedy is what happens to Brown, to young Goodman Brown, and how he changes, how he allows what he has experienced that night to change him, to lose his faith. He loses faith. He feels that he's lost the innocence of his wife, Faith, when he sees her as, being a part of this throng that is getting initiated into satanic rites. So he loses faith in that way, but he also, more properly speaking, loses faith generally speaking. He doesn't live as someone who is faithful lives his life. He doesn't have the kind of joys that a faithful person has. His dying hour is gloom. He lives his entire life in despair, disillusionment, and sorrow, and cynicism, and bitterness. That's the struggle, really. I think that's where I see universal application here, or application to. That's what makes literature. That's what makes great literature great, is that we can relate it to so many other things. Whether you're religious or not, you can see yourself in young Goodman Brown, and you have the choice, just like he did, whether or not to take the devil's staff, to give in to despair, to give in to this kind of joyless existence where you're just convinced that there is no good on earth. And that's something that I think we have to resist. And I'm speaking to myself here. as much as I'm speaking to anybody else. It's a difficult thing to resist, but it's something we have to resist. We have to find strength to resist it. Just my humble opinion as your right-wing English teacher. Thank you for watching. Talk to y'all soon.